Hi again, and welcome back to my channel. The book I'm summarizing in depth is called How to Read a Book, and we're on part 3, chapter 14, and the title of this chapter is How to Read Imaginative Literature. I start with a quote. I love this quote. Beauty is harder to analyze than truth. Page 204. This quotation from the chapter succinctly summarizes what it's about. Okay, think about it. A poem in general is more difficult to comprehend than, say, a recipe, right? This added challenge is the main reason why we're mentioning works of fiction, such as plays and novels, more than halfway through the book. Rather than starting with what to do, I'll first start with what not to do. Before that, though, let's make sure to discern between practical and fictional texts. Okay, what exactly is imaginative literature? Whereas expository texts aim to explain or analyze an experience, fiction in general tries to portray an experience as it is. All right, its purpose, therefore, is usually not to teach but to entertain. This does not mean that only our imagination and our emotions are involved. Okay, it's simply a matter of emphasis. Okay, works of imaginative literature prioritize entertaining you over teaching you. Okay, that does not mean they do not teach. Okay, we use these aspects of ourselves to a greater extent when tackling a work of fiction. Okay, the emotions and imagination. Okay, in other words, practical works help shape the world we live in and make sense of it. Works of fiction help us to temporarily take a break and get away from it all. Of course, this does not apply to all works of fiction. Furthermore, works of fiction can indeed teach us, as I as I just said, but they do so via experience, not argumentation. Another difference between the two is that of ambiguity. Expository works, generally speaking, strive for meaning that is clear and explicit. On the other hand, works of fiction not only use but often depend on ambiguity. What is implied is just as important, if not more so, than what is stated. Slide aside, this is one of the reasons why, for now at least, I won't be doing works of fiction on this channel. Okay, they're meant to be experienced, right? And to experience it, you have to read it. Okay, if I just summarize the plot for you, it's or anyone, right? Um, it's not the same. Okay, I mean for this one, it's not the same. If you read this book with all the extra examples and obviously you're gonna get more out of it. But if you really understood, I think what I'm trying to say here, you can, you can pretty much get what it's what this book is trying to teach you. Okay, not so for fiction, and that's why, again, at least for now, maybe forever, I won't be doing them. Anyway, all of this brings us to our first don't. Okay, remember, I'm going to start with the what not to do and then talk about what to do. All right? So, the first don't. Given that the author of fiction is describing an experience, try to let that experience leave its mark upon you. In other words, do not be as critical as you would when reading expository works. Okay? The second don't is this: do not look for terms, do not look for propositions, do not look for arguments in texts of fiction. These belong to expository works. The meaning of, say, a poem rests in its entirety, right? That is, its whole, not a certain term. The last don't concerns truth. Do not judge a story based on historical, geographical, etc. accuracy. Okay, it is meant to be plausible, but not necessarily true. Exceptions exist, of course, most notably if the author, him or herself, has claimed that their story is, for instance, rooted in a certain historical period. In any case, works of fiction are not meant to be tested, right? And they're not meant to be applied in real life. As mentioned previously, what they can teach us differs, both in nature and application, to politics, philosophy, psychology, etc. Great. I see this in movies, a lot these days. People are so I know what the word is. Critical doesn't accurately describe it. People are so fixated on things that don't matter, right? I remember reading about Face Off. If you guys were like me, alive and kicking in the 90s, okay, when that movie came out in 1997, I've noticed that the more modern viewers have really picked it apart, right? It's impossible for someone to remove, his face and, put it on another's face. And what do they say? They're like, character A slept with the wife of character B when it was supposed to be character B. How did she not realize that, his manhood is different? Okay. It's like, just enjoy the damn movie. It's a damn good movie, right? Enjoy it for what it is, right? A suspenseful action movie. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to rant there. Okay, great. So the don'ts are behind us. Let's move on to the do's. Just like expository works do classify imaginative literature according to genre. Okay, a play is different from a novel. Okay, a modern play is different from a Shakespearean play. Okay, you must also understand the unity of a text. In expository works, that means discovering what the problem was, which in turn leads to the main argument. Okay, the unity of a story, however, generally rests in its plot. Like expository texts, you must be able to summarize the plot in a few lines. Otherwise, your understanding of it will be vague at best. You must also be able to identify the parts that make up the whole. What this means in the case of fiction is forming a time frame that makes sense. Okay? Not all events that chronologically come first in a story start on the first page. Okay? Also, knowing what constitutes the elements of a plot, climax, falling action, so on, knowing these is also important. Okay, so much for the unity of a book and the relationship between parts and whole. Next come the interpretive rules of reading non-expository works. Previously, we named these terms, propositions, and arguments. Instead of terms, here we have characters, feelings, dialogues, events, and so on. Becoming familiar with them is vital to fully understanding a novel. Terms in expository works coalesce into propositions. In fiction, these are instead the world the author has created, a place where all of his or her characters live and interact. Lastly, and in lieu of arguments, imaginative literature contains the continuity of a plot. This is different from identifying its main elements, as mentioned before. Here, you're not distinguishing so much as becoming acutely aware of the plot's intricacy, how it's woven, how it's put together. The third and last part here is the rules of critiquing. Just as one should not, in expository works, pass judgment before understanding, you cannot, with imaginative literature, say whether or not you like a certain book before appreciating its message. In addition, and I quote here, we must remember the obvious fact that we do not agree or disagree with fiction. We either like it or we don't. Page 213. Furthermore, and while it's fair to criticize the premises of an author of expository works, it is not fair to do so in fiction. Here's what I mean by this. You cannot criticize Shakespeare, say, for making Desdemona a Venetian, right? Rather than a Sardinian. Okay? The author of fictional works has every right to choose his or her own world. What we as active readers can criticize is what they choose to do with those characters, with those settings, with the backgrounds, with that world. We criticize truth in expository works, beauty in literature. Ultimately, if you go through all the steps mentioned so far actively, you should be able to answer not only if you like a book or not, but why you like it. What makes it for you a good or enjoyable work of literature? And that's the end. I'll see you in the next video.